As long as we're in the spirit of putting things on the front. I want to do that because I'm going to run this down with an impact. If it's on slightly one way or the other and I try to run it down, I could bend it, break it, or something, maybe worse. Yeah, those are 13s. Now, if I didn't have an impact when I was doing this, I would take my ratchet and a pry bar, wedge it in like this, and then tighten. And then spin it, wedge it in, tighten the next one, spin it, wedge it in, tighten the next one. But this is a little faster. I hope that wasn't premature. I hope that doesn't interfere with putting this on. If it does, I'm going to have to take it back off, unfortunately, but we're almost there. Guess what? Yup. Got to come back off. Let's take this over to the bench, install a new thermostat, clean up the mating surfaces, and get it ready to install because I'm going to put these heater hoses on next. Pretty much, I'm going to try and take care of everything up top here, and then I'm going to raise it up, do everything underneath, and then we're ready to start. There's little doubt in my mind that this engine suffered a severe overheat and possibly caused its demise. For that reason, I'm also going to replace the thermostat. The connection to the cylinder head is here. And this gasket is obviously trashed, but I'm just going to clean that up on the wire wheel a little bit. But before I do that, I'm going to come in and open this thermostat housing up. You can sort of see a little bit of the evidence of the overheat from the discoloration, or that just could be from normal use. The fact that this is slightly off center also gives me cause for concern. 1.27, it doesn't say. This is a 195 degree thermostat. I don't really know what this one is. Either way, whenever we've got an overheat of that magnitude, it's a good idea just to go ahead and replace it. Now, looking at this, it's just a rubber gasket. And I had this in my gasket kit, so I've got a new gasket here. But before I put this other awkward piece back on, what I'll do is I want to clean up the back side of this with my wire wheel so that when I go to mate it up to the engine, it's ready to go. Some of you may be wondering why I didn't clean this surface. Well, that's not what seals. What seals is this seal around the outside of the thermostat. So cleaning up the outside is going to do nothing but make me feel better. It's really the compression of this gasket, once it's in here, that's going to do the sealing. Just going to dial back my gun a little bit. This way it doesn't run them down so hard. Before I work myself into a corner again, by the way, here's my gasket, and as you can see, this side out. I'm just going to place in that area. I also have this bracket here that I believe is one of the things we're going to need to attach our heater hose to when we run it down. I don't know if that goes there or not. These are 13s that hold this down. I'm starting to wonder if I'm convinced if that's the way that goes on there. I think it is. Let me try it the other way. This is a tough call. A part of me keeps saying that this is right. And that has to be right. Because you see how this bracket's like slightly offset like that? Well, this back here is lower. So that's got to take the offset. So it's got to fit in here like this. The more I look at that, the more it seems right. Let's get these hoses into position. And back here you can see that one of these is larger than the other. The one that I'm going to install is the larger one. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to try to figure out too where this harness fits in. Yeah. That's the way it goes. It's got a little clip in the back here. All right, this is the kind of thing I've been talking about this whole time. Whenever you're doing an engine job, you gotta watch out for this stuff. We can see that obviously this harness gets hooked in here, and then looks like we get fastened down there. We hook back there. But it looks like the harness will go under and into this little clamp here, which I suppose we can just do now. And then there's our fuel injectors that we're not going to plug in yet. Remember, we're going to leave those out until the very last minute. That way we're sure to prime the engine with oil before we start it up. Now, just because I've got this here and fitting doesn't mean I'm done, because I want to see what the other hose looks like. Looks like it'll fasten onto here just fine. And the other hose, if I'm not mistaken, goes something like down here to up here. And it looks like that one goes a bit higher. And it also, if I remember right, attaches to the dipstick tube back here like that. So these two hoses won't interfere with one another, but I do believe putting on this larger one first is the way to go. So I'm going to commit now. Slide the hose up onto the heater core back there, and I'm going to clamp that off. And I might as well clamp the harness in place here because I'm about to fasten this whole thing down. Memory serves, this is one of these 13s here. And then we've got, I kept these over by the battery for this. Snug these up, tighten that clamp, moving on. These are all 13s. Now we can put our pulley on. I guess I can't put this on without dropping at least one. All right, let's place that other hose. This one's one of those 13s that I believe held this onto the dipstick tube. Tighten up the clamp. While I'm back here, I'm just going to take this air tube, connect it, since I've got everything else in place. Hit it with a little silicone spray. Help the clamp go on better. Now we've got our other clamp down here. Tighten up the fastener on the dipstick tube. Throw the ratchet on the floor. That fastener looks a bit long, but I'm not really sure where the other one went. I will find it if I need to, but I think that's what we have to work with here. I'm just going to finish up over here. I'm going to install the other radiator hose, and then we'll mount that power steering bracket, power steering / AC bracket, and then the power steering, then the AC. Then the accessory drive belt, probably the radiator. I'll get that in place. Yeah, get the throttle body and everything on there. Everything up on top of the engine, I'll get that done. Yeah, so let's just keep rolling, and then we'll just leave the stuff for underneath. All right, before I get too far, I just thought of something. First of all, I need to put the cap back on the oil, but why not just put some oil in it now? Make it real. I'm gonna start by putting 4 quarts in and checking the level. This is completely bone dry. Not a lot of people realize that you probably still got about a quart of oil in the engine even after you drain it all out. So I think this engine would take like 4, maybe 5 quarts in an oil change. which means if it takes 4, it's probably going to take 5 now. But at least this way we'll have oil in the engine. Nothing would suck more than to get this all together and forget to put oil in it. I've known people that have done it. If you're curious, it takes 5W30. That's what it says on the oil cap. Just going to do a quick check of the level. Kind of difficult to tell now. Looks pretty full at the moment. I'm just going to leave it be. It may only take like half a quart or so, but for now we know the engine at least has enough oil in it to where I haven't forgotten. All right, where were we? Yes, radiator hose. How do I know that this one's the one that goes down there? Well, remember we left our clip on this thing here. I remember this one being a real pain. So I'm just going to start with silicone. I think I found that fastener that goes to the actually oil thing. So I'm going to install that here. But first, let's do this clamp before I forget. I'm going to leave it there so that the next person who has to deal with this doesn't have the same fight that I did. Most times what I like to do is I like to position a hose clamp pretty much in the same position it was in when I took it off. However, in this case, I'm going to make an exception to that rule because sometimes accessibility is worth more than, you know, hoping that everything seals right. I'm going to swap out that bolt on the dipstick tube. This, I believe, is the correct one. Sometimes when you put a fastener back where it's supposed to go, it's just like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to go. Some of you might remember this bolt in the side of the block here, which actually holds the clamp on for this positive cable going to the starter. I'm going to fasten that down now before I get too far into this. I think that guy's a 13. No, it's a 15. Let's get our bracket back in here. Looks like my hose clamp is barely touching it. It's barely touching it, so I'm going to move it a little bit. That should be plenty out of the way. Now, remember our lesson from before when we put the alternator on? We had a heck of a time getting those fasteners in for the alternator. Well, I'm going to do the same thing with this, and plus it'll make it easier to get these in here because now I'm going to have to fight past this hose a little bit. Conveniently laid the power steering pump right there. Thinking this radiator hose actually goes on the inside of these power steering pump hoses. Let me show you. This was positioned on the other side here, and it needs to be in here so that it can hook up to the radiator. Let's put our fasteners in that. All right, if memory serves, there were 3 in the front. I think once I get the first one in, the rest will be a little easier. These are 13s. They're 3 the same length, long ones. Got these 2 shorter 13s that mount in the back there. Oh, it's tricky getting these started. I think I got the lower one though. Leaving this loose helps a great deal. Without doing that, I'm sure it would be even worse. If it goes all the way through, you're lucky. Now, if it doesn't go all the way through, you're a little less lucky, and you're left hunting around until you find it. Now,
I'm lucky enough to find this, but sometimes you're not. And I guess if it gets to a point, you can tell yourself, well, it doesn't want to come out now. You're just going to call it, but consider yourself lucky when it hits the floor. Even though you have to bend over, it's a heck of a lot easier than going around hunting.
Yay, they're all started. Hard part's over. Got our 15 down here. And our 2 up top. I know my power steering pump's held down, but I also know that I can tighten these fasteners up on the bracket and not have to worry about not being able to get the power steering pump on. It's all part of my twisted logic. In many ways, it's decision time. And the decision is this. Should I continue up here or jump down underneath and get everything done under there? I think I'm going to jump underneath and get everything done down there, because one of the things that I want to make sure that I do is that I remove the spark plugs, put a little bit of oil down in each cylinder, and turn the engine over several times until I'm absolutely sure it's built up oil pressure. Once it's done that, I'll be able to hook everything back up and then start it up for the first time. But not before, because I want to make sure that I have oil completely circulated through the engine before I start it up. Remember, it's been sitting for who knows how long since it's been rebuilt, and I want to make sure that it has oil all the way through it. If not, well, our new engine won't last long. So to make sure that we have that unrestricted access, I'm going to leave the AC compressor out of the way, also all the rest of the stuff for the intake, and I think there's no better time to go underneath and wrap things up under there, so that when we come back up here, it is for the last time, hopefully. Let's raise this back up so that we have better access to that stuff underneath. All right, now I'm gonna raise it up a bit so I can gain better access to its tender under parts. We're gonna get this thing done today.
All right, one of the first things I want to deal with here while I'm under is the exhaust. Now, I've just made sure that the gasket was in place, and you remember all the great pains we took to make sure everything lined up and worked like it should. So I'm gonna put these 2 fasteners in that I can get to from here with a straight shot, and then I'm gonna go in through the wheel well to get that 3rd fastener inserted and tightened down. I just made sure that my new gasket is in place, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. So all we should have to do now is get those fasteners in there and make it work. This is a great time to do this because the starter's not in the way. Nothing. And these things are threading right in so easily. I also put a little bit of oil in the threads before I got started. Might even be able to start this 3rd one from under here. And I can, no problem. I think I'm just going to keep going with that. And tighten this last one up with a wrench from under here. I won't even have to go in through the wheel well. All that work that we did with tapping out the holes and everything is what's making this such an easy transition. Well, who needs an impact? If I can get a wrench up in there for that last one, I'll be happy. Let's go in through the side. Yeah, remember this? Finally, done with that exhaust. Okay, well, aside from the exhaust, which we just connected,
we have this plate that needs to go back up in there. Looking at this, looks like it goes in like that. So this piece here goes through like this. And I'll probably start it over on this side. Yeah, maybe not, maybe. Yep, that sort of makes more sense, don't you think? Yeah. So, this goes on here like this. If it doesn't look right, probably isn't. One more piece. All right, we have some unresolved issues here with several grounds. Also, there's some connections that need to be made. These two in particular, they will go to the crank sensor and the knock sensor, but these other two, remember, go to the ignition module, which is right here, and we are going to leave those unplugged. And remember, we're doing that because we're going to be cranking the engine and priming the oil before we actually commit to putting everything together. So I never tighten this all the way. So conveniently enough, I can just spin it right out. And then we'll just start adding grounds. Doesn't really need to be in any particular order. The important thing is that they are attached. Like, not getting these hooked up would be the equivalent of not hooking up the battery. Quite literally. I'm gonna double up. This guy seems to want to live in the back here. Doesn't matter. As long as it's on the engine block, who cares? And where's our big one? Ah, here he is. This one is the cable that's directly from the battery itself. Probably the most important guy in the room right now. Yeah, I'm going to do that the other way. Okay, I think we got them all. I just want to make sure that this will reach everything that it's got. Or you know what? It's got to go up behind this cable. Better to know now than after the fact. Because after the fact, well, it almost always sucks. Might as well just hook these up and see how they look. I'm a real stickler for how wires are routed. I like them clean. I don't like them stretched to their limits or anything like that, like what this one's threatening to do on me. Ah, I see what the issue is. It's you. You are the issue. It's this other ground. Crank sensors hooked up, knock sensors hooked up, and all we have left is ignition module, which after we crank, we can hook those up. Oops, sorry. I definitely don't want this guy coming loose, because like I said, it would be similar to not even hooking the battery up. So we've just got those two connections and we're good. But everything's nice and loose, in a good place. I'm very happy. So I think what I'm going to do is install this truss here on this side, then the starter, then the other truss, and really I'm not really sure what else we need to do under here. So it's going to be, we're closing in. All right, this rod connects in two spots. There's one stud coming off the side of the block that we hopefully remember from before, and then there's this, and you can see by the witness mark that this is the side that goes to the transmission. The other side had the fastener on it. I'm just going to fish it up through. It does not go to a stud.
it goes to a connection just under the oil filter. I'll show you that in a second after I do this connection. All right, where did he go? There he is. Sort of looking like, sadly, I'm gonna have to remove the oil filter yet again because this fastener is coming right down on top of it. So I'm gonna take the oil filter off, put the fastener on, and then put the oil filter back on. Messy, but we managed. Hopefully that's the last time we have to deal with taking the oil filter off.
Remember our little gutter that was held on by this metal clip? Gonna slide that back up on there.
I just took a socket, hammered it on the rest of the way. I screwed it down for the most part, and then I just hammered it on. So now it shouldn't go anywhere, and now it should catch any oil that comes out of the oil filter when we change the oil. Let's move on to that starter. All right, before we grab that starter, there's one last thing on this side we need to deal with, and that is this harness connection right here. It's just fastened onto the side of the transmission. It has this little fastener with an 8mm head on it. Now we're ready for our starter. Before I put it up in there, I've removed the two fasteners on the back of it that I kept there for safekeeping. There are no shims to this one. It's held on by these two fasteners here. I'm going to start the long one first, but it's got to slip up into this hole here by the transmission before it will do its thing. I'm just going to take these bolts all the way out. If I remember right, I had to fish this out of here. Might be it. Yeah, I remember that. I just remembered that there is a fastener in our way to make it easier to get to. There are no shims with this, but sometimes you may have them. General Motors is one of the few manufacturers, I think, that ends up with shims. But in this case, we didn't have any. But we do need to make sure that it fits up on there flush. You can usually feel that kind of stuff. If it's not going up on there quite right, or you can usually feel it. Give him a little fastener back in its hole. Let's get those electrical connections. All right, it's going to be much harder to show you these, but we have this wire that I sort of kept out of the way for the moment. It's supposed to go over the top of all this gobbledygook, and it was fastened to that clutch line. Goes down over the top of the starter. This is a solenoid feed wire. Or there's another electrical connection here that goes to the O2 sensor. We want to make sure that those guys get together. There we are. What I think I can do is, I think I did this last time. I have my long 1/4-inch extension, and I'm going to go up over this cross member. Fortunately, the engine mount's a little bit in my way. My extension's a little short, so I'm going to grab a longer 1/4-inch extension and a swivel for my other 8mm end. In order for this to work, you have to hold your tongue just so. All right, where are you, big cable? It is very difficult to get this cable where I want it. There we go, finally. Why was that so difficult? I think I need a hug. Definitely gonna need a hug when this job is done. I'm gonna use my long extension with a swivel. Come up over the cross member again. I'm not sure if that's gonna work for me. I don't seem to be getting the right angle. I think the only way this would work is if I use a 13mm short, not the deep like I had. I could have swore I took it off using that. All right, well, that's just not working out. I'll try the deep, straight up on the socket. Ratchet, I mean. Use a longer ratchet though. All the starter cables are connected.
Now that our starter's in place,
We got another one of these guys to install.
all right, now one goes on a stud that sticks out of the block. I got one bolt in the front. Feeling like it's having some difficulty going in. A little bit of oil in the threads.
One in the back's also a 13, so I'm just gonna
use a deep socket for that one. O2 sensor connection? Yeah, let's do the O2 sensor connection.
Let's see if I can do the shot and do it one-handed for you. All right, remember our shooting lock? I don't think one-handed's gonna work out. Hold up. All right. We take our harness, bring it up here. It won't feel like it together. Is it together? Once you got it together and it clicks together, insert the lock, you're done. Come on, shooting lock. Are you in? You're in! Yes. I feel like I want to zip tie that to that clutch hydraulic line. That's the way it was when I found it. And mainly because what I'm seeing here is potential for this harness to get tangled up in the exhaust. I don't really want that to happen, so if I zip tie it in just the right way, just enough, I'm gonna grab a zip tie. I'll be right back. That's in a pretty good spot. What else? Nothing else under here?
Nothing else? All right, well, there's nothing else.
Let's go back up top.